The sound of a bulldozer at 5 in the morning is how you learn rich people think they own your life. I heard the engine before I even opened my eyes. Deep metallic, grinding rolling across the lake through the pine trees like distant thunder. Then came the sharp, beeping sound of construction equipment backing up somewhere near the shoreline below my ranch house. I sat upright immediately because nobody moved heavy machinery around Reed Lake Ranch before sunrise unless something was wrong. The cold wooden floor creaked beneath my boots as I crossed the room and pushed open the old screen door overlooking the water. Fog drifted low across the lake beneath pale blue morning light, while diesel fumes floated through the damp air. And right there near the south pasture entrance, 3 excavators and a row of black luxury SUVs sat parked beside fresh construction fencing with bright silver signs already hammered into the dirt. Private Hoa Waterfront District. Authorized resident access only. I stared at the sign for a few seconds, honestly thinking I was still half asleep. Because that fence line cut directly across Reed family land. Not disputed land. Not shared land. Mine. 218 acres of lakeside ranch property, sitting in my family since 1968 before Silver Ridge Estates even existed on county maps. The lake belonged to the ranch. The shoreline belonged to the ranch. Half the fancy HOA subdivision sitting beyond the Pine Ridge technically bordered ranch easement territory most residents never even realized existed. Yet there they were before sunrise, pouring concrete beside my lake like they suddenly owned the place. The excavator bucket slammed into the dirt again, sending wet soil sliding across the grass near the shoreline trail my father built 30 years ago. I grabbed my jacket from the kitchen chair and headed outside, while cold air hit my face hard enough to wake me fully. The ranch smelled like wet cedar, lake water, and fresh diesel fuel. Wrong combination. Completely wrong. As I drove the old Ford pickup down toward the shoreline entrance, more construction lights flickered through the fog beside the water. Workers, wearing reflective vests, moved quickly around stacks of fencing material while somebody directed traffic near the lake access road with a flashlight. They were rushing. That told me everything immediately. People rush construction when they know daylight brings problems. The moment my truck rolled onto the gravel lane, one of the security guards stepped directly into the road, holding up one hand. Young guy. Expensive tactical vest. Probably hired 48 hours ago by somebody who never checked a county survey map in his life. This area is restricted during community development operations, sir. I looked past him toward the shoreline, where workers already installed decorative stone markers along the edge of my fishing dock. My fishing dock. You might want to move. The guard frowned slightly. Excuse me. Because your excavator is parked on my ranch. He looked uncomfortable instantly. Good sign. Most hired security people know when they accidentally stepped into legal disaster territory. Before he could answer, another SUV door opened near the shoreline, and out stepped Vanessa Holloway wearing a cream trench coat and heels completely impractical for muddy construction ground at dawn. HOA presidents always dress like they expect cameras nearby, even at sunrise beside stolen property. She walked toward me confidently, while workers pretended not to listen. Mr. Reed, she said smoothly. I expected this conversation eventually. I almost laughed hearing that. Then you should have expected it before pouring concrete on my land. Vanessa glanced toward the shoreline fencing without concern. Silver Ridge Estates approved expansion of the private marina district after reviewing county development boundaries. There it was. Confident developer language hiding lazy paperwork underneath. I stepped out of the truck slowly while cold wind pushed fog across the water behind us. Who reviewed them? Our legal department. That answer explained everything. HOA lawyers love maps until somebody produces older maps. The excavator behind her started moving again while metal tracks crushed through wet grass near the shoreline pasture. Every second that machine operated increased their liability. Beautiful thing about land disputes. The damage becomes measurable. Vanessa folded her arms while construction crews kept working around us like she expected intimidation through momentum. The community invested heavily into modernizing this lakefront district. This is not your district. Her smile tightened slightly. Mr. Reed, Silver Ridge residents have used this shoreline recreationally for years. Fishing on somebody else's lake does not transfer ownership. A few workers nearby definitely heard that one because suddenly everybody became very interested in pretending to organize equipment quietly. Smart workers know when expensive lawsuits are forming nearby. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice carefully. The board authorized permanent waterfront improvements extending through this section of shoreline. And the board never thought to ask why every original county easement map still says Reed Lake Ranch across this entire peninsula. Silence. Tiny silence. Important silence. Wind rolled across the water, carrying the smell of concrete, mixed drifting from a portable truck parked beside the dock area. Then I noticed something else near the shoreline that almost made me smile. Fresh orange survey flags partially buried beside the fencing line. Old survey markers. My grandfather installed them personally in 1972 after the county finalized the original ranch boundaries, meaning these people either ignored them completely or never understood what they marked. Neither option helped Vanessa. She followed my eyes toward the flags and immediately changed subjects. The residents are excited about the new marina project. Your residents are standing on my ranch. Another silence. This one longer. Because beneath all the expensive SUVs, construction crews, and polished HOA confidence sat one simple problem nobody around that lake fully understood yet. Silver Ridge Estates was never built beside Reed Lake Ranch. It was built on it. And judging by the concrete trucks still backing toward the shoreline while dawn lights spread across the water, Vanessa Holloway had absolutely no idea how dangerous that mistake was about to become for her entire HOA. By 7:30 that morning, half the shoreline looked like somebody had dropped a luxury resort project directly onto my cattle pasture. Workers unloaded polished cedar planks beside the lake while trucks carrying decorative stone rolled through Reed Ranch gates without even slowing down. The craziest part was how normal everybody acted. Men drinking coffee beside machinery. Survey crews checking measurements. Security guards standing around like this construction had been approved months ago instead of appearing overnight on land nobody in that HOA legally owned. I parked my truck beside the old boathouse and watched the sunrise spread orange light across Reed Lake while concrete mixers rumbled near the shoreline. My grandfather used to say rich people move fast when they think paperwork protects them. Problem was, paperwork only matters if somebody actually reads it carefully. Vanessa Holloway walked across the grass toward me carrying a leather folder now, probably sensing the conversation earlier had not gone the way she expected. Her heels sank into wet ground with every step while workers nearby kept pretending not to pay attention. Smart people always listen when property disputes start. "Mr. Reed," she said calmly, "I would like to avoid unnecessary conflict." I looked past her toward the new fencing line cutting across my south pasture. Fresh steel posts hammered directly beside the old split rail fence my father built in 1983. "Then you should probably stop building a marina on my ranch." Her expression tightened slightly again. Tiny cracks. Same as before. Silver Ridge Estates completed a legal review before authorizing this expansion. "Show me." That stopped her for a second. Not long, but enough. Vanessa opened the leather folder anyway and handed me a stack of glossy development permits clipped neatly together with HOA approval seals across the bottom. Expensive paper. Beautiful formatting. Completely useless. I flipped through the pages while morning wind carried the smell of lake water and diesel fuel through the trees around us. Community waterfront enhancement approval. Recreational access. Modernization. Marina District Beautification Project. Every page referenced county zoning compliance, but none of them contained actual ownership verification for the shoreline property itself. There it was. The fatal mistake. They reviewed development permissions without reviewing the land underneath them. I handed the folder back slowly. "You approve construction permits for property you do not own." Vanessa crossed her arms carefully. "The shoreline falls under Silver Ridge Community Usage Designation. Usage is not ownership." One of the contractors nearby suddenly became very interested in organizing toolboxes inside his truck. Good instinct. Because conversations involving those two words usually end inside courtrooms. Vanessa glanced toward the lake, where workers already started placing floating dock sections into the water near my fishing cove. My fishing cove. I learned to cast a line there when I was 9 years old, standing beside my father while morning fog rolled across the lake exactly like this. Now some HOA board thought they could rename it Sunset Marina District because they printed fancy brochures and hired consultants from Scottsdale. The community invested nearly $4 million into this expansion, Vanessa said carefully. Then your community should have spent another $400 checking county deed records. That landed harder than she expected. I could see it immediately in her face, the confidence slipping just enough to matter. She opened the folder again, flipping quickly through pages like the missing answer might suddenly appear if she searched fast enough. Meanwhile, the excavator near the shoreline slammed another concrete footing into the ground beside my dock trail. Every impact echoed across the lake. Expensive sound. Around 8:15, the first Silver Ridge residents started arriving near the shoreline carrying coffee cups and walking dogs along the new marina pathway. Wealthy lake people love construction projects when they think property values are rising. A few smiled at Vanessa while admiring the fencing and dock equipment scattered across my pasture. Nobody smiled at me. To them, I was just the ranch owner standing in the way of progress. Happens all the time near lake communities. Old land starts looking inconvenient once enough luxury homes appear around it. Then one older resident stopped beside the fence and pointed toward the new sign. "This is wonderful, Vanessa. About time the HOA expanded lake access." Vanessa smiled instantly. Easier audience. The Marina District will include private boat slips, outdoor lounges, and resident shoreline privileges. Resident shoreline privileges. I almost laughed hearing that phrase while standing 15 feet from the original Reed Ranch survey marker hammered into the ground before most of those homes existed. The resident noticed me beside the truck. "You live around here?" Vanessa answered before I could. "Mr. Reed owns the adjacent ranch property." Adjacent. Interesting word choice considering half the marina equipment currently sat on my land. The resident nodded politely without really looking at me. "Well, this whole area will look much better modernized." Then he walked away toward the lake while his golden retriever pulled against the leash, trying to reach the water. Vanessa looked satisfied after that interaction, like public support somehow changed county property law. The community wants this project. The community has no idea where they are standing. That line finally wiped the smile off her face completely. Silence settled between us while construction machinery hummed near the shoreline and lake wind moved through the pine trees overhead. Then a white county utility truck rolled slowly down the gravel road toward the marina site. My attention locked on it immediately because county vehicles rarely appear accidentally before 9 in the morning. Vanessa noticed it too. The truck stopped beside the fencing line, and an older man wearing a county infrastructure jacket stepped out, carrying rolled survey maps beneath one arm. Carl Jennings, 26 years with county land management. Smart enough to know every easement around Reed Lake by memory. Carl looked from the marina construction to me standing beside the dock trail and immediately frowned. "Mason," he called out slowly, "why is there concrete equipment sitting on protected shoreline easement land?" The expression on Vanessa Holloway's face right then was worth more than the entire $4 million marina project behind her. Because for the first time since sunrise, somebody official had finally said the words out loud. Protected shoreline easement land. And judging by the way Carl Jennings kept staring at the construction crews parked across my pasture, Silver Ridge Estates had absolutely no idea how deep the problem was about to get. The sound of construction equipment stopped completely the second Carl Jennings stepped out of that county truck. Funny how fast confidence disappears when somebody carrying official maps arrives unexpectedly. Workers who spent the last 3 hours acting like they owned the shoreline suddenly looked very busy checking toolboxes and avoiding eye contact. Even the excavator engine idled lower like the machine itself sensed legal trouble drifting across the lake. Carl walked slowly toward the marina site, while morning fog lifted through the pine trees around Reed Ranch. He carried a thick roll of county survey maps beneath one arm and a yellow inspection folder tucked against his chest. Vanessa Holloway moved toward him immediately before he reached the shoreline fencing. "Smart move. Control the conversation early if possible." "Mr. Jennings," she said smoothly, "Silver Ridge Estates already completed all necessary development approvals." Carl did not even slow down. Approvals for what? The new Marina District expansion. He finally stopped beside the dock trail and looked directly at the fresh concrete forms sitting across my pasture. Then he looked at the steel fence posts hammered beside the shoreline. Then at the floating dock sections tied near my fishing cove. The expression on his face turned darker with every second. "Who authorized construction inside protected easement territory?" Vanessa opened her leather folder again with the same polished confidence she had used on me earlier. Problem was, county inspectors do not care about polished confidence. They care about line numbers and parcel maps. She handed Carl the paperwork while workers nearby pretended not to listen. Carl flipped through the permits silently for about 30 seconds while wind rolled lake water smell across the construction site. Then he handed everything back. These are zoning permits. Vanessa blinked once. Correct. Zoning is not ownership. There it was again. Same sentence. Same problem. Only now it came from county infrastructure management instead of the ranch owner standing in boots beside an old dock. A few Silver Ridge residents walking near the shoreline slowed down after hearing that exchange. Good. Let them listen. Carl crouched beside one of the orange survey flags partially buried near the fence line and brushed mud away with one hand. The old brass marker underneath caught sunlight immediately. Reed Shoreline Easement District. 1972. Carl looked back toward Vanessa slowly. You poured concrete within 18 feet of a protected county easement marker. Her confidence cracked visibly for the first time all morning. Tiny shift. Tightened jaw. Faster breathing. Our legal team reviewed the district boundaries. Carl straightened up carefully. Then your legal team skipped the archived survey overlays. I almost smiled hearing that because archived survey overlays were exactly where the real problem lived. Most developers only reviewed updated zoning summaries when Silver Ridge Estates expanded years ago. Nobody bothered checking the original county infrastructure maps from the 1970s because wealthy communities assume old ranch land eventually stops matching. Big mistake around lake territory. The older the land, the more dangerous the paperwork usually becomes. Carl walked farther toward the shoreline while studying the marina equipment spread across my pasture. Then he stopped again beside the floating dock sections resting near the water. You boys anchored these already? One of the contractors nodded nervously. Carl rubbed one hand across his forehead slowly. Jesus. Vanessa stepped closer immediately. What exactly is the issue here? Carl looked directly at her. The issue is your HOA appears to be building a luxury marina inside a county shoreline easement system attached to Reed Ranch infrastructure. Silence dropped hard after that. Even the residents standing near the walking trail stopped moving. Because people hear the word infrastructure and suddenly realize this is bigger than landscaping disputes or HOA complaints. Infrastructure means roads, utilities, drainage systems, expensive things buried underground that determine whether entire communities function properly. Vanessa crossed her arms tightly now. Defensive posture. Silver Ridge Estates has existed here for 20 years. On paper, maybe, Carl answered calmly. But these easement corridors existed before your subdivision was even approved. He pointed toward the lakefront road curving through the trees behind the marina site. Matter of fact, most of your South District utility access probably still runs through Reed easement land. That one landed like a hammer. I saw it immediately in Vanessa's face. Not because she understood fully yet. Because she realized she did not understand fully. Dangerous moment for somebody used to controlling every conversation. Around 10:30, Carl requested immediate suspension of all marina construction pending county review. The workers shut equipment down completely while residents gathered near the shoreline asking nervous questions about permits and property boundaries. Vanessa kept trying to maintain authority, but the atmosphere changed too much already. The lake no longer felt like a luxury development project. It felt like a mistake somebody had finally uncovered. I walked back toward the ranch house around noon, while county photographs were taken beside every survey marker along the shoreline. Carl followed, carrying his map tube beneath one arm. You ever review the old district overlays yourself? He asked quietly once we reached the porch. Not in years. He nodded slowly like he expected that answer. Might want to. Then he handed me a photocopied county reference sheet from his folder. Original Reed Ranch parcel overlays connected through multiple shaded sections beneath Silver Ridge Estates. Roads, drainage channels, utility easements, recreational access corridors. I stared at the map for several long seconds while cold realization settled. Across my shoulders heavier than the morning fog had. Because this was bigger than a marina dispute. Much bigger. Silver Ridge Estates had not just expanded onto my land. The entire HOA subdivision had been developed around Reed Ranch easement infrastructure from the very beginning. Carl watched me carefully while wind moved through the pine trees around the porch. Looks like your family never transferred half the underlying access territory developers thought they acquired back in 1909. I looked down toward the subdivision stretching beyond the lake ridge where expensive rooftops glimmered under late morning sunlight. Hundreds of homes, clubhouse, roads, utility systems, all sitting quietly on assumptions nobody checked carefully enough. How bad is this? I asked finally. Carl exhaled once. Mason, if these overlays hold up during county review. He glanced back toward the marina site, where Vanessa Holloway stood surrounded by confused residents near the halted construction equipment. Then your HOA president just built a private marina on land her subdivision might not legally control in the first place. That afternoon, Silver Ridge Estates tried pretending nothing happened, which honestly impressed me a little. Most people would slow down after a county inspector discovers your luxury marina project is sitting on protected ranch easement land. Not Vanessa Holloway. By 3 o'clock, valet signs lined the clubhouse entrance while catering trucks rolled into the subdivision carrying silver trays and champagne buckets like the community planned to celebrate its own legal disaster publicly. Turns out they were. The HOA scheduled a waterfront modernization celebration weeks earlier, and Vanessa refused to cancel it even after county review started. Pride makes wealthy people do incredible things. I parked beside the old feed barn overlooking the subdivision while warm afternoon wind pushed across Reed Lake carrying music and laughter from the Silver Ridge clubhouse patio below. White tents covered the lawn beside the marina construction site, while residents in linen shirts and expensive sunglasses walked around, holding drinks near fencing that technically sat on my ranch. The whole thing looked like somebody hosted a country club party directly inside a property dispute. Emma arrived around 4 carrying a cardboard box filled with old county files from the Reed Ranch office attic. Dust coated half the folders. You should see what I found, she said while dropping the box onto the truck bed. I opened the first folder carefully and almost laughed immediately. Original development negotiations from 1999. Letters between county officials and Silver Ridge developers discussing restricted easement limitations across Reed Ranch property. Better than that, several pages contained highlighted warnings specifically stating the subdivision could never claim permanent ownership rights over underlying access territory surrounding the Lake District. Vanessa's developers knew. Every single one of them knew. Emma leaned against the truck while music echoed faintly across the water from the clubhouse celebration below. That HOA built an empire on temporary permissions and forgot the permissions belonged to somebody. Around 5:30, fireworks of wealth started rolling into the subdivision. Black Escalades, imported sports cars, golf carts decorated with Silver Ridge flags, residents laughing beside the shoreline while construction fencing still surrounded the half-finished marina project county inspectors technically suspended 6 hours earlier. Nobody there understood what was happening yet. To them, Reed Ranch was just empty land surrounding their luxury community. Background scenery. Old property, waiting to become profitable eventually. Then Vanessa stepped onto the clubhouse patio holding a microphone while the lake reflected gold evening light behind her. Tonight, she announced proudly, we celebrate the future of Silver Ridge waterfront living. Applause exploded across the patio. I stood beside the truck bed watching through the trees while Emma shook her head slowly beside me. Vanessa pointed dramatically toward the marina construction site, where decorative lights now glowed around the shoreline fencing. Our expanded Lake District will become the centerpiece of this county. More applause. More champagne glasses raised. Nobody noticed the white county survey trucks quietly rolling down the shoreline road behind the clubhouse at that exact moment. But I noticed, and judging by the expression on Carl Jennings' face when he stepped out carrying orange marker stakes, he was not arriving to enjoy waterfront cocktails. The music slowly died once residents saw county crews walking toward the marina site. Workers carrying tripods, measuring rods, and fluorescent survey tape do not blend well into luxury celebrations. Conversations started fading across the patio while Carl approached the shoreline directly with 3 county surveyors behind him. Vanessa lowered the microphone immediately. Mr. Jennings, she called sharply, this is a private HOA event. Carl barely looked at her. County easement review. Then he pointed toward the ground beside the marina fencing. Start there. The survey crew immediately began hammering bright orange stakes directly through the manicured lawn surrounding the waterfront district, while residents stood frozen, holding wine glasses beside decorative lanterns and catered seafood tables. One surveyor stretched fluorescent tape across the edge of the marina project, while another placed numbered markers beside the floating dock sections sitting in the water. The atmosphere changed instantly. Luxury celebration gone. Legal investigation now. Vanessa walked toward Carl quickly, trying to keep her voice controlled. You cannot disrupt a community function like this. Carl finally stopped and looked directly at her. Mrs. Holloway, your community function appears to be operating inside Reed Ranch easement territory. Silence hit harder than any microphone feedback ever could, because this time residents heard it clearly themselves. Reed Ranch easement territory. Not HOA waterfront district. Not community marina zone. Reed Ranch. The surveyors kept moving methodically through the property while sunset reflected across the lake behind them. Then one of the county workers hammered a marker stake directly beside the clubhouse patio itself. That got everybody's attention. I saw confusion spreading immediately through the crowd. Residents whispering, looking around nervously, watching county crews measure sidewalks, retaining walls, utility boxes, and parking areas surrounding the waterfront section. Vanessa stepped toward Carl again. What exactly are you measuring? He answered without emotion. Underlying property ownership. The whispering became louder after that. One resident actually laughed nervously like the whole thing had to be some misunderstanding. Another looked toward the clubhouse itself with sudden concern. Smart instinct. Because the deeper Carl's crews moved into the subdivision, the worse the map overlays became. I knew already from the attic files. The marina was not the real problem. The real problem sat underneath half the subdivision infrastructure itself. Carl eventually walked toward me near the edge of the parking area carrying his clipboard while the celebration behind him collapsed into nervous silence. Mason, he said low enough only I could hear. You might want to prepare yourself. I looked toward the survey stakes now surrounding the marina, shoreline road, and clubhouse patio beneath the fading evening sunlight. For what? Carl exhaled once while county crews continued placing markers deeper into Silver Ridge estates. Looks like this HOA was not just built beside your ranch. He glanced back toward the massive clubhouse standing above the lake where confused residents still gathered around Vanessa Holloway. It was built directly on top of it. The next morning, Reed Lake looked completely different. Not physically. The water still reflected pale gray dawn beneath the pine trees, and the old shoreline still curved around the ranch exactly like it had my entire life. But the atmosphere changed overnight. You could feel it the second you drove near Silver Ridge Estates. Panic has a sound when wealthy neighborhoods experience it for the first time. Car doors slamming too fast. Nervous conversations near mailboxes. Golf carts moving before sunrise. People suddenly reading documents they ignored for 20 years. I stopped beside the old cattle gate overlooking the subdivision entrance around 6:40 while steam rose from my coffee cup into the cold morning air. Below the hill, county utility trucks already lined the roadside beside the main gate to Silver Ridge. More survey markers appeared overnight too. Bright orange stakes now stretched across the entrance boulevard, the marina district, and part of the clubhouse parking lot like somebody outlined invisible fractures running underneath the community itself. Emma pulled up beside me in her truck, carrying fresh copies of the archived county overlays Carl requested. You need to see page 12, she said immediately. I opened the folder on the hood of my pickup while wind pushed through the pines overhead. Original utility schematics. Sewer access corridors. Emergency roadway easements. Water management drainage lines. All highlighted beneath Silver Ridge Estates with one phrase repeating across every page. Underlying property control. Reedland Trust. I stared at that sentence for several long seconds while morning sunlight slowly crept across the lake below. The HOA never owned the foundation underneath their own subdivision. They owned structures, landscaping, decorative authority, but the physical land carrying their roads, drainage systems, and shoreline access still belonged to the ranch trust my grandfather established decades earlier. No wonder the county maps looked nervous. Around 7:30, the first television news van rolled into the subdivision. Then another. Local reporters love two things more than weather emergencies around lake communities: HOA scandals and rich people losing property control. Residents gathered near the clubhouse entrance watching county surveyors stretch measurement lines across sections of the Marina District while cameras recorded everything from the roadside. Vanessa Holloway emerged from the clubhouse wearing another perfectly tailored outfit despite looking like she had not slept all night. Even from a distance, I could see the stress finally reaching her. No polished confidence anymore, just damage control. She spotted my truck near the gate hill and immediately walked toward me across damp grass still covered with morning dew. "Mr. Reed," she said sharply once she reached the roadside, "this situation is getting blown out of proportion." I looked down toward the subdivision where residents stood beside county workers watching survey measurements move through the parking areas. "Looks proportional to me." Her jaw tightened instantly. "Your family never objected to the subdivision development before. My family never watched your HOA build a private marina on ranch shoreline either." She held up a stack of papers quickly. "Silver Ridge legally purchased development rights in 1999. Development rights are not land ownership." Same sentence again. Funny how truth stays simple, while lies require increasingly expensive explanations. Vanessa lowered her voice while traffic slowly backed up behind county vehicles near the main entrance. "Do you understand what happens if these easement claims spread publicly?" I glanced toward the reporters filming the survey crews near the clubhouse. "Looks public already." She exhaled hard through her nose, trying to maintain composure. "Property values could collapse." There it was. Finally. Not community pride. Not neighborhood identity. Money. Always money underneath HOA power games. I folded the overlay maps calmly and leaned against the truck door while lake wind moved cold across the ridge. "You built a luxury subdivision on top of ranch easements nobody properly transferred. The developers assured the board everything was compliant. Then your developers lied to you." That sentence landed harder than she expected because deep down she already knew it might be true. Around 8:15, Carl Jennings called me toward the Marina District where county infrastructure teams now clustered around a massive utility access panel near the clubhouse parking area. Residents gathered behind temporary barriers watching nervously while workers opened maintenance covers beside the sidewalk. Carl pointed down into the exposed access trench beneath the pavement. "Main water control routing." I looked closer immediately. Old steel identification plates bolted inside the access chamber. "Reedland Trust Water District. Installed 1974. My grandfather's name practically sat underneath the HOA clubhouse. Carl rubbed one hand across his forehead tiredly. "This keeps getting worse." Vanessa arrived seconds later, flanked by two nervous board members carrying legal folders and phones pressed against their ears. Carl pointed toward the access chamber without emotion. "Your main subdivision water routing appears connected through legacy ranch easement systems." One board member actually went pale hearing that. Another looked like he might throw up directly onto the sidewalk. Because everybody there finally understood the scale now. Roads could be rerouted eventually. Marina projects could be canceled. But utility infrastructure buried underneath an entire luxury subdivision? Different category entirely. Residents nearby started whispering louder once reporters zoomed cameras toward the exposed access trench. One older homeowner stepped forward looking genuinely shaken. "Are you saying this subdivision was never fully ours?" Nobody answered immediately. Wind rolled across the lake, carrying the metallic smell of exposed utility chambers through the Marina District, while county crews kept documenting everything with cameras and clipboards. Then Carl finally spoke carefully enough for everybody nearby to hear. "I am saying the underlying land ownership situation appears significantly different from what residents were originally told." Silence spread across the crowd after that. Not angry silence. Fearful silence. The kind that settles over expensive places when people realize paperwork matters more than appearances. Vanessa turned toward me suddenly. "What do you want?" Every resident nearby looked at me after that question. Reporters too. Cameras waiting. County crews standing motionless beside exposed infrastructure tied directly to my family trust. I looked past all of them toward Reed Lake shimmering beneath cold morning sunlight beyond the unfinished marina. I want everybody to stop pretending this ranch was ever theirs to take. By noon, Silver Ridge Estates looked less like a luxury lake community and more like the scene of an insurance investigation nobody could stop. County vehicles lined both sides of the entrance boulevard while residents gathered in clusters near. The clubhouse whispering over property maps printed from online county records. Phones stayed glued to everybody's hands. Realtors arrived wearing forced smiles. Lawyers started appearing in expensive SUVs. Even the landscaping crews stopped trimming hedges because apparently maintaining decorative bushes becomes less important when homeowners realize their multi-million-dollar subdivision may sit on land they never fully controlled. I stood near the shoreline fence watching workers remove sections of the unfinished marina dock under county suspension orders, while wind carried the smell of wet cedar and fresh-cut grass across the lake. The mood felt heavier now. Not angry anymore. Fearful. Because people finally understood this was not a petty HOA argument between a ranch owner and a community board. This was infrastructure, utilities, land rights, the invisible foundation underneath everything they thought they owned. Emma walked toward me carrying another stack of archive copies from the county clerk office. "You were right about the drainage corridors," she said quietly. I flipped through the pages while sunlight reflected sharply across the lake behind her. Original engineering approvals from 1999. Temporary utility accommodation agreements. Conditional land access permissions signed by the Reed Land Trust during initial subdivision construction. Every page carried restrictions Silver Ridge developers apparently ignored after the original project finished. One sentence appeared repeatedly in bold capital letters. No transfer of underlying property ownership implied. I almost laughed reading it because the warning could not have been clearer if somebody painted it across the clubhouse roof. Yet 20 years later, an HOA president still stood beside my shoreline acting like she controlled the lake. Around 1:30, Carl Jennings called an emergency county review meeting inside the Silver Ridge clubhouse. Residents packed the main ballroom shoulder to shoulder beneath giant crystal chandeliers overlooking Reed Lake. The atmosphere felt completely different from the celebration Vanessa hosted the night before. No music now. No champagne. Just nervous homeowners clutching legal pads while county officials arranged easement maps across folding tables near the stage. Vanessa stood near the front wearing another polished outfit that could not hide the exhaustion underneath her face anymore. She looked like somebody trying to hold together a collapsing building using confidence alone. Carl stepped to the microphone first while overhead projectors displayed enlarged county overlays across the ballroom wall. Roads lit up in red lines. Utility corridors in blue. Drainage systems in yellow. And beneath nearly half the subdivision sat one repeating label. Reed Land Trust Easement Territory. Murmuring spread instantly through the room. Homeowners leaned forward staring at the maps like they were looking at a foreign language suddenly translated into disaster. Carl pointed toward the shoreline district first. Current county review indicates portions of Silver Ridge Estates infrastructure were developed under temporary access agreements attached to Reed Ranch easement systems. Somebody near the back interrupted immediately. "What does temporary mean?" Carl answered without emotion. "It means the subdivision received conditional usage rights, not permanent ownership transfer." Silence hit hard after that. You could actually hear the lake wind rattling clubhouse windows behind the crowd. Vanessa stepped toward the microphone quickly. "Silver Ridge residents purchased homes legally and in good faith." Carl nodded once. "Nobody is disputing homeowner purchases." Then he pointed toward the map again. "The concern involves the land beneath shared infrastructure systems." That distinction terrified people even more, because homeowners suddenly realized the issue was not their kitchens or swimming pools. It was roads, water access, utility lines, sewer routing, things entire communities physically depend on every single day without thinking about them. One older resident stood up slowly near the center aisle. "Are you saying this entire HOA was built on somebody else's property?" Nobody answered immediately. Instead, Carl looked toward me, standing near the ballroom wall beside Emma and several county attorneys. Every face in the room followed his eyes. Hundreds of residents suddenly staring directly at the ranch owner most of them ignored for years while driving past Reed Lake every morning. Carl finally spoke carefully. "Current records indicate Reed Land Trust retained underlying control across significant portions of subdivision access territory. Panic does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it spreads quietly across expensive rooms through small sounds. Nervous breathing, whispered conversations, chairs shifting against hardwood floors, somebody dropping a pen near the front row because their hands started shaking. Vanessa stepped toward me after that while residents watched openly now. No superiority left in her posture. No polished HOA confidence. Just desperation buried beneath expensive fabric. Mr. Reed, she said carefully into the microphone. Surely there is a reasonable solution here. I looked around the ballroom first. Crystal lighting. Imported wood floors. Giant windows facing the lake my grandfather fished long before Silver Ridge existed. Then I looked toward the projection map, showing red easement lines running directly underneath the clubhouse itself. Reasonable would have been asking permission before building a marina on my ranch. Nobody in the room moved after that. Carl switched projector slides, revealing another overlay beneath the clubhouse district. Main roadway access. Emergency vehicle routing. Utility maintenance corridors. All crossing Reedland Trust property. A county attorney near the stage cleared his throat quietly. Without negotiated easement continuation agreements, portions of current subdivision infrastructure may require operational review. Operational review. Another calm phrase carrying enormous consequences. Because everybody there understood what it really meant. Their HOA did not control its own foundation. Vanessa gripped the podium tightly while staring at the maps projected across the ballroom wall. Then she asked the question everybody feared most. What happens now? Carl folded his arms slowly beneath the projector glow while the room waited in complete silence. Now, he said calmly, the county determines how much of Silver Ridge Estates legally exists because Reed Ranch allowed it to. The meeting inside the clubhouse ended in complete silence. Not dramatic silence. Worse, the kind where nobody knows what question to ask first because every possible answer sounds expensive. Residents walked slowly into the parking lot beneath gray evening skies, clutching copies of county overlays like medical reports after a bad diagnosis. Nobody talked about marina upgrades anymore. Nobody cared about waterfront beautification plans or luxury property branding. The only thing anybody wanted to know now was whether their homes still held the value they thought existed yesterday morning. I stood near the clubhouse entrance watching homeowners gather around parked golf carts while cold wind rolled off Reed Lake through the pine trees. The subdivision looked older somehow. Smaller. Like the illusion of control had been peeled away from the expensive stonework and decorative gates all at once. Emma walked beside me carrying 2 coffees while county officials loaded projectors and map boards into utility trucks near the Marina District. They are finally seeing the place for what it really is, she said quietly. I nodded toward the clubhouse roof visible beyond the parking lot. A resort built on borrowed ground. Around 6:30, the first moving truck arrived at one of the waterfront homes near the South Ridge. That got everybody's attention fast. Wealthy communities panicked quietly at first, then suddenly all at once. A for sale sign appeared near the Marina Trail before sunset. Another went up beside the golf course entrance less than an hour later. Realtors started making emergency phone calls beside their cars while homeowners searched county records from their phones sitting on clubhouse benches. Vanessa Holloway remained inside the ballroom long after most residents left. Through the giant glass windows facing the lake, I could see her standing beside stacks of legal paperwork surrounded by exhausted board members and attorneys speaking in low, urgent voices. No confidence left now, only containment strategy. Carl Jennings walked toward me near the marina fencing while workers removed another section of unfinished dock from the water behind him. County review expanded, he said quietly. Drainage systems too. I looked toward the shoreline where orange markers now stretched far beyond the Marina District into landscaped sections of the subdivision itself. How bad? Carl exhaled slowly while rubbing one hand across his jaw. Worse than we thought. Then he handed me another overlay copy. This one showed underground infrastructure running beneath nearly the entire southern half of Silver Ridge Estates. Water routing channels. Emergency runoff systems. Electrical conduit access. Every major system connected back through original Reed Ranch easements signed decades earlier. My grandfather practically held the subdivision together from the grave without anybody realizing it. Developers were supposed to renegotiate permanent transfers before Phase 3 expansion, Carl explained quietly. Looks like they never completed it. I stared down at the map while evening light faded across the lake beyond the unfinished marina. And nobody noticed for 20 years? Carl laughed once without humor. People notice whatever keeps property values rising. Nobody checks old easement archives unless something breaks. Right then, raised voices erupted near the clubhouse entrance. Residents surrounding Vanessa Holloway now. Angry ones. The atmosphere shifted immediately from nervous fear into public blame. You told us the HOA controlled the shoreline. You said the marina expansion was fully approved. Did the board even verify ownership? Vanessa tried answering calmly, but panic spreads faster once expensive neighborhoods smell liability. One homeowner waved printed county overlays in the air, while another demanded emergency reimbursement meetings. The luxury image Silver Ridge spent years building collapsed completely in less than 48 hours. All because somebody forgot old ranch families keep records longer than HOAs keep promises. By 8 o'clock, county inspectors shut down all active waterfront construction permanently pending legal review. Floodlights illuminated the marina district while workers packed equipment under supervision. Beside bright orange easement markers glowing across the shoreline. It looked less like a luxury lake expansion now and more like a crime scene for paperwork mistakes. Emma leaned against the old ranch fence beside me, watching excavators load onto trailers one by one. Funny thing is, she said softly, you never even tried taking anything from them. I looked down toward the subdivision where residents still argued beside the clubhouse beneath decorative lantern lights. No, I answered. They just could not stand the idea somebody else already owned the ground beneath their authority. A black SUV suddenly pulled up beside the ranch gate, and Vanessa stepped out alone this time. No board members. No attorneys. No polished public performance. Just exhaustion hidden beneath expensive clothes. She walked toward us slowly while lake wind pushed strands of hair across her face. Can we talk privately? She asked. Emma looked at me once before heading back toward the truck. Vanessa stopped beside the old split-rail fence overlooking Reed Lake, while county crews continued dismantling marina equipment below. What exactly do you want from Silver Ridge? She asked quietly. You really still do not understand? She folded her arms tightly against the cold wind. People could lose everything over this. I looked toward the subdivision lights reflecting across the lake beneath the darkening sky. My family spent 20 years watching your HOA slowly erase every sign this ranch existed. Her expression tightened. That was never personal. You built a private marina on my fishing cove. Silence again. Heavy silence this time. Then she lowered her voice even further. If the county confirms these easements fully, the subdivision may need to renegotiate access agreements with you directly. There it was. Finally, the truth underneath all the luxury branding and HOA authority. Silver Ridge Estates did not control Reed Ranch. It depended on it. Completely. I looked past Vanessa toward the giant illuminated clubhouse sitting beside the lake like a monument to expensive assumptions. Your HOA spent years acting like this ranch was the problem, I said calmly. Now everybody gets to learn what happens when the land starts answering back. Rain rolled across Reed Lake sometime after midnight, and by morning the entire subdivision looked washed out beneath low gray clouds and cold October wind. Silver Ridge Estates no longer felt like the untouchable luxury community people bragged about at country clubs and real estate conferences. It felt exposed now. Temporary. County survey stakes still lined the roads like warning signs while unfinished marina fencing rattled beside the shoreline every time the wind moved through the lake district. I drove slowly down the entrance road around 7:30 watching residents stand near mailboxes reading fresh legal notices delivered overnight. Emergency HOA assessments. County infrastructure reviews. Temporary suspension of waterfront expansion permits. The kind of paperwork that destroys expensive neighborhoods faster than storms ever could. Half the people standing outside looked exhausted already. Sleep disappears quickly once homeowners realize their million-dollar properties depend on land rights somebody else controls completely. The funniest part was how polite everyone suddenly became toward me. Residents who ignored Reed Ranch for years now waved nervously whenever my truck passed. One older couple even stepped aside, near the marina trail like they were afraid walking too close to the shoreline might somehow offend the person who technically owned it. Amazing what county overlays can do to social behavior. Emma sat inside the ranch office when I returned carrying fresh coffee and another pile of newspaper clippings spread across the desk. Local media is calling it the largest easement dispute this county has seen in decades, she said. I glanced at the television mounted above the filing cabinets. Helicopter footage of Silver Ridge Estates filled the screen while reporters discussed property uncertainty and luxury market instability, beside aerial shots of the marina construction site sitting abandoned beneath Orange County markers. Beneath the footage, a headline scrolled slowly across the bottom. Waterfront Hoa built on ranch easement land. Emma shook her head while flipping through. County statements. They spent 20 years pretending your family land was background scenery. Most developers treat old ranches like temporary inconveniences. Before she answered, another black SUV rolled into the ranch driveway, throwing gravel behind it. Different vehicle this time. No HOA branding. No security contractors. Just Vanessa Holloway sitting alone behind the wheel, looking like somebody carrying the weight of an entire collapsing subdivision on her shoulders. She stepped out wearing a dark wool coat instead of her usual luxury presentation outfits. Smart change. Nobody dresses confidently after county attorneys start reviewing your infrastructure maps. Rainwater dripped from the pine branches overhead while she walked toward the office porch carrying a thick leather binder pressed tightly against her chest. I need 10 minutes, she said quietly. Emma looked at me once before heading toward the kitchen area inside the ranch house. Vanessa remained standing near the porch railing while lake wind pushed cold air across the property. No performance left now. No polished HOA tone. Just desperation wrapped carefully inside professionalism. The board voted last night, she finally said. Silver Ridge wants to negotiate permanent easement acquisition. I almost smiled hearing that phrase because now they finally used the correct word. Acquisition, not modernization, not enhancement. Ownership. Your HOA cannot afford permanent acquisition, I answered calmly. Her silence confirmed I was right. The subdivision already bled money through legal reviews, frozen property sales, suspended construction projects, and emergency attorney consultations. Residents were furious. Banks started questioning financing exposure. Realtors quietly advised clients to wait before purchasing inside Silver Ridge. The illusion cracked too deeply already. Vanessa opened the binder, slowly revealing proposed settlement documents thicker than a phone book. The board authorized an initial offer. She slid the paperwork across the porch table toward me. 8 figures. Massive money even for lakefront territory. Enough to buy another ranch twice this size somewhere else. Enough to make most people forget history entirely. I looked down at the paperwork while rain tapped softly against the porch roof overhead. Then I closed the binder gently without reading farther. No. Vanessa stared at me for several seconds like she honestly expected hesitation. You did not even review the numbers. Because this was never about numbers. That answer hit her harder than any legal threat could have. She leaned against the porch railing slowly while wind carried the smell of wet cedar and lake water through the trees around us. Then what is it about? I looked past her toward Reed Lake, where the unfinished marina still sat abandoned beside my shoreline beneath gray morning clouds. Your HOA spent years acting like this ranch only existed until wealthy enough people decided otherwise. She lowered her eyes briefly after that. Maybe first honest moment she experienced since the subdivision crisis began. The board thought the easements were symbolic, she admitted quietly. Developers told us the ranch boundaries were outdated. Outdated land still counts. Another silence settled between us while rain drifted across the lake beyond the porch. Then Vanessa looked back toward the subdivision barely visible through the pine trees. People are scared. I followed her gaze toward Silver Ridge Estates, where luxury rooftops now looked strangely fragile beneath dark skies and county survey markers. They should be angry at the people who built homes without securing the ground underneath them. She nodded once. Small motion. Defeated motion. Then her phone started ringing inside her coat pocket again. Probably attorneys. Maybe board members. Maybe residents finally realizing the HOA president who promised waterfront expansion nearly triggered the largest property collapse in county history instead. Vanessa silenced the call without answering and looked at me one final time. If the county finalizes these findings, Silver Ridge may not survive as an independent HOA. I leaned back in the porch chair listening to rain strike the lake beyond the pasture. Then maybe the community should stop pretending ownership comes from expensive signs and gated entrances. She stood there quietly for another moment before turning back toward her SUV. Halfway down the porch steps, she stopped once more without looking at me. You really are not selling? Wind moved through the pine trees while cold rain blurred the shoreline beyond the ranch. No, I answered calmly. Because my grandfather did not spend 50 years protecting this lake, just so an HOA could rename it after itself. 3 months later, the giant stone entrance sign for Silver Ridge Estates still stood beside the lake road. But somebody had quietly removed the words private waterfront community from the bottom sometime before Thanksgiving. Only faint discoloration remained where the metal letters used to be bolted into the rock. Funny how fast luxury branding disappears once lawyers and county inspectors start asking who actually owns the land underneath it. Reed Lake looked peaceful again that morning. Thin fog drifted across the water beneath pale winter sunlight, while pine needles covered sections of the old ranch road leading toward the shoreline. The marina project was completely gone now. County crews removed every unfinished dock section, every decorative fence, every unauthorized concrete footing the HOA tried installing across my pasture. Even the grass slowly started growing back along the shoreline, where excavators tore through the fishing cove months earlier. Nature repairs itself quietly when people finally stop pretending they own everything they touch. I stood beside the old dock holding a coffee cup while cold air moved across the lake, carrying the smell of cedar smoke from distant cabins farther down the shoreline. The ranch felt like itself again. No survey crews, no television vans, no emergency HOA meetings echoing through the subdivision at night. Just water, wind, and the soft creaking sound of the dock beneath my boots, exactly like it sounded when my grandfather taught me to fish there as a kid. Emma walked down from the ranch house, carrying fresh mail tucked beneath one arm. Final county settlement arrived, she said while handing me the envelope. Thick legal paperwork. Permanent easement restructuring agreement between Reed Land Trust and Silver Ridge Estates. Months of county review finally finished. The outcome looked exactly how it should have from the beginning. The HOA retained conditional access rights for roads and utility systems, but all underlying land ownership remained permanently attached to Reed Ranch. No future expansion, no marina developments, no alteration of shoreline infrastructure without written ranch approval. And maybe my favorite part, the county formally designated portions of Reed Lake shoreline as protected historical ranch territory under preservation oversight. My grandfather would have loved that detail. Around 9 o'clock, residents slowly started appearing along the shoreline trails again. Different atmosphere now. People waved more, talked softer. Several homeowners even stopped near the dock asking polite questions about fishing conditions and county restoration work. Amazing transformation. The same subdivision that once treated the ranch like outdated scenery suddenly behaved like respectful neighbors once they realized their community existed because Reed Ranch allowed it to. Vanessa Holloway moved away shortly after the county finalized the infrastructure findings. Last I heard, she accepted a consulting position somewhere outside Phoenix managing luxury development branding. Appropriate ending, honestly. Some people belong around brochures more than actual land. Silver Ridge dissolved the old HOA board completely during restructuring and replaced most leadership positions with county-supervised property management coordinators focused entirely on compliance oversight. No more aggressive expansion committees. No more luxury shoreline campaigns. Turns out public humiliation cures arrogance surprisingly well. Carl Jennings stopped by around lunchtime, driving the same county utility truck he arrived in the first morning construction crews invaded my pasture. He stepped out carrying a thermos and leaned against the ranch fence overlooking the subdivision below. Quiet now, he said. I nodded toward Silver Ridge where holiday decorations now hung modestly around homes that suddenly looked less like symbols of wealth and more like ordinary neighborhoods again. People finally learned the difference between property value and property ownership. Carl laughed softly. County Planning Department is using your case during training seminars now. That bad? Mason, developers built nearly half a luxury subdivision without securing the underlying easement transfers properly. He shook his head slowly while looking toward the lake. That mistake is going into textbooks. We stood there quietly for a moment watching sunlight break through the clouds above Reed Lake, while ducks drifted near the shoreline reeds beside the old fishing cove. Then Carl looked toward the restored pasture where the marina project once Saturday, he said thoughtfully. Most people would have sold once the money got high enough. I looked out across the lake where the water reflected silver beneath winter skies beyond the pine trees surrounding the ranch. That is the problem with people who only understand land as investment, I answered calmly. They never realize some places matter because they are remembered. Carl nodded once after that and headed back toward his truck while wind moved gently through the shoreline pines overhead. Later that evening, I drove slowly through Silver Ridge Estates for the first time since the county settlement finalized. No gates blocked the entrance road anymore. The decorative security checkpoint near the boulevard had been removed completely during restructuring. Children rode bicycles near the clubhouse while homeowners walked dogs along the sidewalks beneath Christmas lights glowing softly across the subdivision. Ordinary neighborhood sounds. Honest sounds. Not the artificial exclusivity the old HOA spent years trying to manufacture around my lake. As I passed the clubhouse overlooking Reed Lake, I noticed something else too. The giant wall map inside the lobby had been changed. The waterfront district no longer carried luxury branding names or marina expansion labels. Instead, the entire shoreline area simply read Reed Lake Historical District. Quiet correction. Permanent correction. I drove back toward the ranch slowly while dusk settled across the water and lights reflected gently along the shoreline. The old split-rail fence still stood beside the road exactly where my father built it 40 years earlier. The lake still smelled like cedar and cold water after sunset. And the ranch still belonged to the family that protected it long before wealthy people arrived thinking ownership could be manufactured through HOA meetings and expensive signs. In the end, Silver Ridge Estates finally learned the truth every old ranch family understands eventually. Land does not care about status. It only remembers who stayed when everybody else treated it like something temporary.